The Goner School. We did dangerous and stupid things. We're dangerous and stupid, ignorant and arrogant. We did things we saw people do. Saved by what we didn't know could happen. We were just getting young, caught dangerous and stupid with our educations written all over us, our huge, expensive educations. We were so caught up in danger and stupidity with our big, empty eyes, our stupid, heavily lined eyes, our energies, eyes with the stakes emptied out of them, night diner fluorescence our youth was caught in the glare of. I had a hot chocolate. The boys had omelets. You could dim us. We wept and fasted, wept and prayed, and our periods came. Actually, we were pregnant. We had sex like a dictionary. We wanted to be other, for others were better than we were to ourselves. With our stupid eyes and bigger mouths, we were pregnant with ourselves. In the water tower, at the makeup counter, we were bitchy and hungry and blamed other women, our youth, caught in their glare. By pissy trucks and passing grain, we drove dangerously, stupidly. Unto passing trucks who honked, we did danger and left nothing out. Sun caught their windshields as we passed, speeding each toward more Midwest, a place I didn't know I was from. Until trees spit moss and Shasta loomed and hot springs waited for the time we'd go. I always said what kind of person I was. I was that kind of person. Does this come out? Oh, yes. Okay, it's better. This is called Planet Drill. I just had a book come out by this title. Planet Drill. Into freedom, I seek to ascend vibration. Into freedom, I seek to ascend vibration. To ascend vibration, a glass wall long enough. Long enough we've waited, our heads under desks. Under desks, the bombs will all but save us. But save us. But saved, the past is like a brick. Like a brick already, I'm living in the house. Living in the house, I live under construction. Construction by those with their heads under desks. Under desks, now chairs of the government running my front deck like a porch. Like a porch, the tomb. But what's like a deck? A deck is evening, the evening chamber as the evening draws back. The evening draws back to planet original color, a glass wall. A glass wall long enough to stand by then walking myself to glass. To glass, the secrets don't themselves opaque, but opaque in alignment of invisible forces. Forces then together that force to commit martyrdom, or should have martyrdom become its own martyr. Because we're here tonight to celebrate process, I thought I would let you in on some of the process behind the poem I just recited for you, Planet Drill. It's a poem I wrote actually in 2010. I was a student at the Iowa Writers Workshop. I was a first year. I was very overstimulated, and I was in a seminar with the poet James Galvin, who I will furthermore call Jim, on the poet James Merrill, who I will furthermore call Merrill, for us to not confuse the Jameses. Jim brought in the Merrill poem, The Broken Home. I don't know if anyone knows this poem. Merrill is a poet who's known for being very formal. He liked to write in conventional forms, and he liked especially to write in conventional meters. When Jim brought in The Broken Home, he showed us that this poem that appeared to be kind of one long poem in various stanzas was actually a poem in sections, and those sections were each a sonnet. He also pointed out that the first sonnet of the poem, The Broken Home, was, by his estimation, and I kind of think this is wrong, but we can just take it for the drama of the story, was the only bit of verse that James Merrill had ever written in free verse as opposed to in meter. So this is the only poem, right, that isn't in something like iambic pentameter or trochaic tetrameter, that kind of thing. But Jim had decided that Merrill couldn't have meant to actually have this poem be in free verse, and that it must have in some way been in meter. So he took it upon himself to do essentially a metrical translation of the Merrill poem into iambic pentameter. And the way he did this was he took language from so you start the poem and you take language from the second line, move it up to the first line to extend that line to be 5 beats long, then repeat that language in the second line, bring up language from the third line to extend that line to be 5 beats long, and onward until you've made a metrical translation of the poem into which the poem is now in iambic pentameter. And as Jim went about doing this essentially avant-garde experiment on this formalist James Merrill poem, he discovered that it was yielding something really moving and meaningful from the language of that James Merrill poem. And he came to believe that this was actually what Merrill had intended in the poem. And he told our class that when Merrill had come to Iowa at some point to give a reading, he had asked Merrill, is this what you intend? He had showed Merrill the translation, and Merrill, in Jim's story, said, yes, that's secretly what I intended from the poem. It's really hard to believe that that's actually the case, but I mean, I feel like, why not? Let's believe it, because it's more beautiful to believe it. So in order to illustrate this for you, I'm going to share with you the original James Merrill sonnet, and then I'm going to share with you the metrically altered James Merrill sonnet. And what I want you to listen for is just the way that the repeated language takes on a kind of hinging meaning, where it in its repetition, it kind of enriches and changes the meaning of the poem, as opposed to simply leaving the poem stationary but wordier or something like that. So the poem is called The Broken Home, James Merrill. Crossing the street, I saw the parents and the child at their window, gleaming like fruit with evening's mild gold leaf. In a room on the floor below, sunless, cooler, a brimming saucer of wax, marbly and dim. I have lit what's left of my life. I have thrown out yesterday's milk and opened a book of maxims. The flame quickens. The word stirs. Tell me, tongue of fire, that you and I are as real at least as the people upstairs. And now for the metrical translation. Now for the avant-garde experiment on this James Merrill poem. Crossing the street, I saw the parents and the child at their window, gleaming like fruit with evening's gleaming, like fruit with evening's mild gold leaf. In a room on the floor below, sunless, cooler. On the floor below, sunless, cooler, a brimming saucer of wax, marbly and dim. Marbly and dim, I have lit what's left of my life. I have thrown out yesterday's milk and opened a book of maxims. The flame quickens. The flame quickens. The word stirs. Tell me, the word stirs. Tell me, tongue of fire, that you, tongue of fire, that you and I are as real, and I are as real at least as the people upstairs. Beautiful. I know, we have to let Jim know that I'm sharing this poem. I think he doesn't know. So this Merrill poem just had this translation had this enormous effect on me. And I went home and I thought, what if I could try to do something like this in some way where I repeat some language in some way that it would do something like this poem. And what that inspired was this poem, Planet Drill, that I recited for you before. I just shared that anecdote. And I'm going to recite it for you again, just so you can hear you can hear what you hear, and you'll of course hear that, I'm not James Merrill, but you can also hear whatever I am. Okay, Planet Drill. Oh, the last thing I'll say is, as I worked in this constraint, it became really interesting to me to recognize what would be the most sort of minimalist expression of the constraint and what would be the maximalist expression. The minimalist struck me as, well, it's you bring only one word down from one line to the next, or no words, or there's like you put a word in between, or you break the rule. And the maximalists seemed to me that you would repeat the entire line. And so the last thing I did when I wrote this poem was I repeated the entire first line. Somehow it just seemed right to signal that this was how the poem was going to move. Planet drill. Into freedom, I seek to ascend vibration. Into freedom, I seek to ascend vibration. To ascend vibration, a glass wall long enough. Long enough we've waited, our heads under desks. Under desks, the bombs will all but save us. But save us. But saved, the past is like a brick. Like a brick already, I'm living in the house. Living in the house, I live under construction. Construction by those with their heads under desks. Under desks now, chairs of the government running my front deck like a porch. Like a porch, the tomb. But what's like a deck? A deck is evening, the evening chamber as the evening draws back. The evening draws back to planet original color, a glass wall long enough to stand by. By then, walking myself to glass. To glass, the secrets don't themselves opaque, but opaque in alignment of invisible forces. Forces then together that force to commit martyrdom, or should have martyrdom become its own martyr. Thanks. Thanks so much. I just have one more poem for you, and it's a more recent poem. So in terms of the process theme of the evening, you can hear the artistic changes that have occurred in me over the last decade. All right. It's called Hindsight. It's a little longer, but not that long. Hindsight. Staring out over a field of bees and grasses, wildflowers and ticks, knowing it was no place to lie down, that we couldn't lie down in it, something happened to me related to difficulty. Let me start from the beginning. We were difficult people, arising from our mother's difficulties in a shrinking because globalizing economy that made us think we could be kings if only we invested correctly, pharaohs if we could just finish our novel. One evening, after a few rounds of karaoke, we sprawled about discussing democracy. And while it was the consensus that the system, unchecked, imbalanced, floundered, we could not agree on whether our age was darker or any more a failure than any other. We were the people we went to about anything, such that we'd narrate experience to ourselves the way we'd tell it to each other. But that night, exhausted, polarized, we retreated to bed as to corners. According to our partners, anyone really who watched from outside, we had a way of making a problem of everything. That problem was not the problem. The problem was that evident and manifest in the world around us, we saw beckoning, golden and sweet, cold when it was hot, forgiving when we were sorry, morphing to embody any moment's reprieve, every available possibility. Miraculously, we still made decisions, yet we couldn't live with them, even the choice to live with our choices, maintaining authority only by translating this skill, the seeing of everything, to poetry, painting, psychoanalysis, filmmaking, teaching, whatever it was we found ourselves doing the day we woke up and asked if we shouldn't find something more lucrative to do. For what had been a way of feeling above money now seemed silly, idealistic, antisocial, and self-abnegating, and we had mouths to feed, our own. Who hid this regret best showed it silently. Small protests like refusing to help with the dishes, finding it impossible in a city full of gorgeous, intelligent, funny, successful women to fall in love with any of them. As for me, I had inexplicable panic in my body, spurred by anything that might give me joy. A popsicle, a date, a book, a shower, a basket, a letter, a garden, a room, an idea, a picture, a poem. But this was over now that I'd been granted a residency in the be-loud field of Arrowhead, Herman Melville's Berkshire estate. There was a marathon reading of Moby Dick on, and that I walked into the barn to pee just before Paul Giamatti was slated to read confirmed for me that I was in a new phase of manifesting, wrought by the session with the energy healer who had unexpectedly and beyond all rational belief actually healed me. Indeed, I had been speaking with my niece. She was going through her first real heartbreak, the kind that leaves you grieving not just a person, but a version of your life's events in which things make any kind of sense. I could decide to feel fine, she said, but I reject that premise. I wasn't happy for her misery, but I did find it vindicating. It had turned me from the family idiot to an oracle only those willing to look at their pain could visit. It seemed to come down to whether you believed knowledge to be a filling up or an emptying. It felt good to be here, to bask in Melville's achievement, to imagine being a writer people cared about. The field literally glittered, insects everywhere making white noise, Mount Greylock in the distance. Melville looked out, the tour guide said, and imagined these hills the back of a whale. I thought, really? Or did we want so badly to explain his genius, we came up with a shape the nearest cloud could be, not the shape of a cloud, but a face or a puppy. This was like hindsight, the immersive James Turrell exhibit I'd just seen. Alone, I followed a railing along a wall through pitch darkness to my seat. I sat down and immediately saw a white circle in front of me emanating low, humming light. As my eyes strained to see it, the circle dissolved entirely, everything taking on its qualities, low, humming light now all around. I looked away. There it was again, the circle, intact in my peripheral vision. Let the mountain be the mountain. The whale is in you, Melville. We don't have to see it, except in the way you want us to, in a book, a story. The rain was heavy. I closed my studio door and still water pooled beneath. When it let up, I opened the door onto Eden, a secret garden, everything wet and new. Me too, starting over from a feeling of well-being. Staring out, I saw that I was seeing what Melville had seen. Clouds over the mountain clearing made the field and trees beyond it one surface, waving, the sky still roiling from the storm. I had been wrong. It really could be the sky over a vast and uncompromising sea. Waves parting to reveal the back of a whale on which the rain continued lightly. My studio a coffin caulked to be a life buoy, one that could save me. Another sailor drowning in regret. Thank you.